Welcome back to MyFinJourney. Today we have the pleasure of having Mike Deaton with us. Mike and his wife are both experts at what they do. They've had a career in corporate America and then they pivoted and transitioned into real estate investing, specifically land investing. It'll be a unique conversation. Maybe we'll touch on things that you haven't heard before. Maybe you'll learn how to monetize off of land, which isn't necessarily something that a lot of people are familiar with. And then ultimately, we might even pivot and transition and really dive deeper into what Mike does in addition to land coaching, which is in addition to land investing, which is actually coaching investors and helping them position to build financial stability and financial freedom. And that's what we're all about here at MyFinJourney, helping you get 1% better. Mike, welcome to the episode.
I'm excited to dig into the journey and see if we can add some value to your listeners.
Me too, man. Me too. When you say dig into the journey, is it like a pun on land development? Like what do you mean when you think of digging into your journey?
Yeah, there's definitely some aspects of a pun there since we're land centric, but really, your podcast, My Fin Journey, it's all about. I mean, life is just a journey, and I'm still on mine, and it certainly has taken some turns that I didn't expect. It's presented me with opportunities I never expected, but it comes with challenges and growth and all of that stuff. So that's where for me digging in really gets down into the meat of what has happened and hopefully beyond what people see on the socials and other aspects of people's journeys.
I love that, Mike, because it's a very free-flowing answer, but at the same time, I feel like it glosses over what growth really means. Like sometimes we use words that sound nice, but the journey is actually much more taxing than people realize. And social media doesn't always give you the likes and impressions when you're really in the thick of it. It's more like the nice after that gets you that engagement. So when you look at life, when you look at your journey, what do you look at as like those really trying, tough times that actually laid the foundation for the massive success that you've had to date?
Yeah, I like all of that too. I mean, it's really fundamental to all of our stories and character building, quite honestly. I mean, if I think about my youth, I was really had a pretty nice life as a child, and my parents were middle class. They actually flipped homes when I was young, before home flipping was really a thing. Like, it's just part of how my parents earned money. They would buy an older property that was run down. We would move into it, fix it up over months or a year, and then resell it and move on. My dad became a general contractor, a home builder out of that. And that never really resonated with me. When I went to school, I was going to be a doctor. I wanted to be a professional with a salary and the kind of the poor dad mindset, if people are familiar with the rich dad, poor dad concept. But then life happens, right? I decided medicine wasn't for me. It was going to take too long. I had my own doubts. Could I get into med school? All of that kind of carried forward. And I just stumbled my way into a corporate career with tech companies, mostly in operations. And for 25-ish years, that was my path. I climbed the ladder. You know, personal life was ups and downs in that period of time. I mean, I was married young, not too young, but like 20, right out of college. So 22-ish, had kids, two daughters, but it's just that journey. You get on the hamster wheel and you're going. We got into a lot of debt. We had a mortgage, all of the stuff that keeps you really golden handcuffs, like they say, tied into that job. And it took a toll. My marriage unraveled. I got a divorce. Just my career started going sideways through that period of time. But those hardships, as you mentioned, definitely bring you clarity and character. And for me, that had a lot to do with my financial situation. I did not want to get into debt ever again. I took an expat assignment in Europe to start up a factory for Nokia mobile phones at the time. It's where I met Ligia, my wife now, and I kind of reshaped my whole Mike 2.0, right? It was like I was able to build something. I hired thousands of people, built a factory, ran it, went from 0 to 1 million mobile phone production and just got things going. I kind of got back on my feet and those kind of things. But then again, like in 2016, I was working for Microsoft in their supply chain and was part of a layoff, a voluntary reduction. And I found myself out of work and all of the stress that comes along with that. That was my only income at the time, right? Ligia and I were both salary employees. She also got let go like at the same time. And so our income stopped. And that was the moment where we took some time to reflect on what we wanted out of life, what the future of our relationship, our work, what that was going to look like. And that pushed us down a different path. It was not jumping right back into the corporate world, which was my instinct, was to get right back in, but it was really about centering on our values, like I said, what we wanted out of life, how we wanted to live it. And that pushed us down an entrepreneurial path. And we can kind of get into the details of all that, but that ended up being vacant land flipping for us, at least in that moment. And it just has delivered a life that I think I could never have really completely envisioned in that time frame.
That's really powerful, Mike. I want to thank you for sharing that with us. The first question that comes to mind, Mike, is do you feel like as an individual you need to go through those challenges to get that growth? Or do you feel like you can learn the same value by hearing the story and learning from somebody else's challenges?
I definitely believe it's possible. I mean, I'm a big believer in leveraging the lessons and the learnings of others to go faster, make fewer mistakes. When we started our land business, we joined a program, we hired a coach, we injected ourselves into a community. We've since gotten into other asset classes. We've been in multifamily syndications. We did the same thing. We found a group, we got a coach, we paid for that. I have business coaches now that I pay for their expertise and to help in that way. And so I'm a big believer in it. Ligia and I were just having this conversation earlier this morning, actually. All too often, I think it's human nature, however, that it takes some type of crisis to really motivate us to change, because status quo, while we may not like it in some ways, it's comfortable, and change requires energy and constant habit building over time, and it requires active energy. And if you're not motivated enough, you just it's going to be hard to take root. I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. I've kind of followed him since I was a teenager, and he talks about your why and your purpose, and how that whatever picture you paint needs to be more compelling than the current state in some way, to act as that lever to get you to move. And it's just, yeah, I think it's very much a part of our human nature that it does take some kind of it doesn't have to be a crisis, but I think it does take some. For different people it works differently, right? There's carrots and sticks, incentives and disincentives, and some of us all react better to one or the other. Fear as a motivator, or a vision as a motivator. But it requires something to want to change. Is almost just not enough for most of us. I think we have to have some really strong motivator, because like our land business, we've been in business for 10 years. Our first year was not easy. It was learning, it was making mistakes, it was going through resistance, doubts, all the stuff. And if we hadn't have had a compelling vision and each other to pull us through those moments, we would have probably given into the resistance. And so anytime we work with clients today, that's a fundamental part of it. It's like helping create the strong motivator as to why they really want this. And that really has a lot to do with what drives people to be successful or to abandon. So, long answer to your question. I mean, I think it's obviously a nuanced one. There's no one right answer, but I do think for most of us, some event or some scare has to happen that really instills the motivation to make the change.
Sort of like a jolt, like a little shock to the system. Could be
Yeah.
positive, could be negative, just to get you to think a bit clearer. So, Mike, I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said. And before I dive deeper, I want to say to the audience that if you're listening to this episode, if you're finding value, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, but most importantly, share this with a friend, because that's what's going to help you grow faster, is if you grow with somebody and if you grow together. Mike, you mentioned the idea of growing. I just mentioned it as well. But through that process of growing, when you look back at yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, etc., do you feel like you're a different person? And do you feel like you had to let go of certain things to become who you are today? Maybe the Mike 2.0, the Mike 3.0, etc.
without a doubt, for sure. Our transition, at least from our perspective, was fairly significant, right? I mean, I spent 25 years working in a corporate environment. I had a boss, I had multiple bosses. They had their own agendas. They directed me in terms of how I needed to behave, how I needed to work, the performance,
How you needed to think.
travel, all the stuff. Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of latitude. I was kind of a senior level leader, but I still had bosses. And when we shifted into entrepreneurship, a totally different environment. And this is where, my backstory comes into, I was a first child. I was a high achiever. My parents were my mom was a school teacher. She was super academically oriented. Like there was no exception to getting A's. I was athletic and you get praised for performance. And so I just have this mindset, but that mindset built in me a fear of failure. My identity started to get kind of determined by my performance. And the corporate world reinforces all of that type of behavior. But when you're an entrepreneur, it's a totally different environment. I have had to embrace, I'm going to say the word failure. I don't like the word failure, but I had to embrace trying, not achieving, iterating, and moving. And as an entrepreneur, especially in 2026, you have to move quickly and you have to fail fast, as they say, and test and iterate fairly quickly. And so that has been one of the biggest changes that I've had to come to terms with in terms of my own personal growth. There are obviously other things like my barometer of safety. When you have a paycheck, you have this conception of that being safe every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, paychecks coming in, feeding a 401k. I have benefits. As an entrepreneur, deals may happen quickly or not. You go through lean periods and stronger periods. You have to, I had to recalibrate a little bit all of that. But definitely this journey has been just almost nonstop growth. And that's why I continue to invest in personal development and coaching and trying to understand my blind spots or where am I needing further development, just to go faster, to go make fewer mistakes and those kind of things. But yeah, there's for sure growth that has happened and that needs to happen to get to another level of our business.
Mike, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I think you're a very good speaker. And so I want to tell people that if you're listening to this, you need to go back, rewind, and re listen to Mike's answer. But don't like listen to the words as the words come at you. Really slow down, even if you think quick and whatever. Put it at like 0.75 speed. Really slow down and really listen and hear Mike's answer because there's so much wisdom that if I just sat here and unpacked it, it would be an hour. So I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to say, Mike, is you mentioned the idea of having coaches. You mentioned the idea of growth. You mentioned the idea of going from a corporate environment to a non-corporate environment where you're your own boss. You talked about having coaches, and those coaches helped you learn what you don't know, helped you unpack those blind spots, and helped you identify how you want to grow and how you want to scale. And you also mentioned, maybe I am unpacking it too much, I apologize. You mentioned how you need to be quick, especially in 2025. But I think the part that you respectfully didn't mention is how real estate historically is not the type of industry that adapts and changes quickly. So if you are the person who implements new technology in real estate, and if you have a very growth mindset, and if you're always on the lookout for new opportunities and you're bringing it into real estate, you can be very lethal. And you can use that lethality to create a lot of alpha, to create a lot of revenue generation, to create a lot of value, to make a lot of money, very simply. So I want to understand, Mike, from your perspective, you've had coaches, you've been in the land game for a while. Most people don't get into the land game per se. I want to understand from your perspective, where are avenues that you've been able to create a lot of wealth for yourself, for your family? And how is technology and how is embracing that growth mentality helped you accomplish that?
It's a great point you make, Mustafa. I mean, the real estate is and still is today very old school. Like the technology itself is not necessarily changing the fundamentals of the real estate game, but it can help in terms of certain elements. In our industry specifically, kind of the high level way the model works is we are We are reaching out off market to property owners, making them a below market offer. Usually that's like 40% of the market value. 1 or 2% of our offers get accepted, and then we're transacting those deals. And so when we started 10 years ago, the common way to do this was like letters or postcards, right? You're reaching out. It is still the most cost-effective way to be doing it. There are texting platforms and cold calling platforms and skip tracing for emails and doing all this stuff, Google ads, and there's all the different ways of technology. And we try these out every quarter or 6 months or something. We usually are kind of testing some other, but the US mail is still far and away the most cost-effective means of doing it.
Why do you think that is?
Well, with technology, there becomes a lot of, like, for instance, if you go into texting or calling, there's regulations where that they're not present in the US mail. You have to, people are on do not call lists, or the FCC regulates who you can solicit via mobile phones and things like that. And so that requires some extra overhead for whoever's doing the technology implementation. It just requires a bit of technology. Now it's coming down, as all technology is going to. It comes down and it will likely edge out some things. But for instance, we just spoke with a property owner last week who got a letter from us and also receives text messages, but nobody's responding. Get a response out of anybody. It's like a do not call type number. And so there's just there are people that are old school and they like to get a letter, and they like slight diversion. Over the last 10 years, I will say a consistent theme across our success when we talk to people, so many times we hear that we're the first people who actually got back to someone when they say, hey, I'd love to sell you my property. I don't understand it, but people they're either side hustling and they're not quite committed. They're just not really running a professional operation, or they don't have the systems in place to be able to respond. But it doesn't take much to stand out above the competition. But
Can we pause there,
for
Mike, if
me
you don't mind?
Sure.
You mentioned a statement. It doesn't take much to stand out from the competition. You
Mm.
also mentioned 25 years in corporate America in leadership positions. So I assume you worked with a lot of people. How often do those people stand out from the competition? If you had 100 ex-employees that you managed, how many of them would you actually think of by name, saying, hey, I remember this person and they were good at their job?
Yeah, it's single digits for sure, right? I mean, there's definitely the stars, and they're the tail end of the distribution curve, if you will.
Call some of them out if you don't mind. We'll send them this episode.
For sure. Yeah, I can list a few names. Worked with a guy, Guillermo Colga, who was just amazing energy, Vasile Hajduk in Romania, and others. I mean, there are those people that you meet that are energetic, they're intelligent, they are invested in the business. If we're talking about the corporate world, that stand out in that way, and they're the high performers. And one of the unfortunate things about corporate America is a lot of times performance is imposed. You can only have X number of high performers. You need to have X number of low tail performers, and a distribution, and that's going to be
For
how
the
the
bonuses.
merit. Yeah, that's how the salaries and the merit increases are handed out. And for me, that's one of the things I love about entrepreneurship is I'm in control. Like if I want to earn more money this year, I know what to do. I know how to do it, and I can move those levers. And so that's been really an epiphany for me, moving from being beholden to my boss to say, you're either going to get 2.7% or maybe you're going to get 2.9%.
And maybe inflation is 3%.
It definitely is today. Yeah.
So Mike, let's zoom
we're
in on
kind
this
of,
if you don't mind. Right? The
yeah.
idea that in theory, what you can spend time on that will generate more revenue for the business. Are there certain things in the business that you spend time on that either won't generate more revenue for the business or might in the foreseeable future, but not in the short term?
Yeah. So our business is really about acquisition and sales. And so on the acquisition side, we have markets that we know are tried and true, and we go deep. So in that instance, I know if I apply more leverage, if I send out more offers, if I leverage more finances to make more acquisitions, those are direct things that I can do. At the same time, about every quarter, we test a new market or two. and I don't know if exactly what the market's going to receive, how it's going to receive our offers. And so there's within market selection, there's kind of two different avenues. There's the proven markets that I know I turn this knob, I'm going to get more accepted offers, because it becomes a statistical pursuit
Eventuality.
at some point. I know in a certain market that I'm getting a certain response rate at this offer price. And so there's just a few variables that I can tweak, and I know, okay, I can accelerate in here. And then when we're testing other markets, we may, and this is one of the things that I have had to come to accept, is that I would, in the early days, spend weeks analyzing a market, trying to understand the nuances before I would spend money to send out offers and see what the response is. Now it's a little bit more like, let's just kind of get it roughly right. We send out the offers and we see what comes back and we iterate from there. And so there have been instances where it's not necessarily a wasted investment, but we can send out some offers and not get a response. But it's a data point. Like, I understand, okay, the offer was not right, or this market's not right, or something. I can pivot from there. That's just one side of the equation, where two different scenarios, I know the investment's either going to bear fruit, or this one's more of an uncertain type of a thing. And it lands pretty simple. It can be complex, but that in and of itself is acquisitions. On the sales side, when we started our business, we were doing really kind of low value properties and the margins were thinner. But we quickly realized, for the same amount of energy, we can level up into different property class. And then we can leverage title companies to do due diligence and some of the research. They hold escrow. We can leverage realtors to do the marketing and sales. And so it kind of opened up our ability to scale and run the business in that way. But at a high level, that's really just the business model. It's not like a house, single family home, or multifamily or commercial real estate, where you have a lot of variables coming into the equation that any one or two of them can really throw the business case off quite a bit. With land, it's very simple. Things, as you mentioned, the real estate market, especially in vacant land, doesn't fluctuate rapidly. And so we're selling within any kind of cycle that could come. So we kind of know what our margins are going to be before we ever make a purchase.
So I want to zoom into this a little bit more, Mike, if you don't mind. It felt like you said we started with cheaper land and now we're buying more expensive land. And buying that more expensive land is actually less risky because there's a bit more margin for us to insulate, not from a return profile perspective, but from a due diligence and disposition, like from a sales perspective, we can build a better team to execute more efficiently. Does that feel accurate? Does that feel like an accurate summation?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just for instance, like when we started, and we have clients who come to us that have a limited budget, or they only want to use a limited budget because they're uncertain of the model. And that's a very natural thing. I mean, we were that way as well. And so we might buy a property for $5,000 or less. And in our business model, we're roughly doubling or tripling our money on a deal. So let's just say we buy a property for 5,000, we might sell it for 12,000. Well, within that 12,000, we're talking 7,000 in profit. And if you leverage a realtor, well, they're going to take 10% of that. Some of them will have a $1,000 flat fee. So now you've kind of taken a 15% out of your profit margin. If you go through title, especially if you go through it on both sides, when you're buying and when you're selling, now you're talking another $1,000 to $2,000. And so, whereas the percentage ROI is great, the net margin just has less to play with as people take their piece of it. Now, for instance, we might buy a property for 15,000 and sell it for 45 or somewhere in there. Well, now there's a lot to go around. We can pay a realtor a 10% commission. We can let a title company charge us $1,000, even some other fees, and now we're netting 30,000 out of a deal or something. And so it's just a different game. And then you continue to scale up. And so as it's the concept of overhead, right? At low levels of revenue and margins, overhead takes a large chunk. But as you scale, that overhead doesn't scale proportionally typically. And so you're able to allocate it across either more deals or more revenue or things like that. And so that is exactly kind of the way the business model is. It's also a proponent for using leverage, because you can get up and level up into a different class of properties. And land has been great. I say it's also been, it's a double-edged sword, but it's a business where you can be a little sloppy because there's a lot of margin in the deals. And so you don't have to be like a top-notch business person to be able to run your land business. So
I
like I
guess
said,
that's why
double-edged
there's.
sword. I mean, yeah,
I hear you.
for
I guess
sure.
that's why people aren't responding to those mailers. Clients, potential home seller is interested
Yeah.
in selling, but the home buyer is not responding. So Mike, help us understand, right? I live in New Jersey. I'm not sure where you live, but where are you finding land for $5,000 to $50,000? Like, what markets are you looking at, if you don't mind disclosing?
Yeah. So we personally do a lot of business in Colorado. We live in Colorado. And we just like the land here. When we work with clients, usually the formula is, first of all, it's your buy box. Some people have 5,000 to work with. Some people have 50,000 to work with. And so that's going to steer you into different markets, exactly to your question. But it's a common misconception. People think, oh, I live in New York, or I live in Miami, or whatever, Dallas. I can't buy property here. Well, you don't have to. I mean, we buy property all over the country. We have clients who live on the East Coast and buy in the Pacific Northwest. But almost every state has regions of, large swaths of vacant land. The Southwest is particularly fruitful for larger tracts, 5-10 acre tracts and up. And you can get those relatively cheap. I mean, there's a county next to us here where we work in a region, and we buy 5 acre tracts for between $6,000 and $8,000 total. Like, now that's not market price. That's our 30 to 40% on the
Discount.
dollar type price. But all through the Southwest, there's those types of things. But in other markets, there are, in Florida, for instance, is the largest land exchange state in the nation. There's just a ton of vacant land deals. But there's a lot of more suburban type land. There's quarter-acre subdivisions that are platted out and not built out. And there's a lot of people that just trade in those types of properties. They can be a little bit more or a little bit less depending on proximity to urban areas. If it's how built out is it with, paved roads, infrastructure or not, different elements. But you can literally find land almost anywhere, even upstate New York. There's pockets where land becomes much more approachable than in Manhattan.
I love it, Mike. So help me understand the model, right? Is the model to go buy, let's say, that $50,000 land for, let's say, I don't know, $15,000, and then to sell it for 50K? Is that the goal?
In a nutshell, that's it. We essentially, what we do is we'll go into a market, we'll understand at a sub-market level what are the comps for, let's just say, 1 acre property. And if it's $50,000, great. Then we'll go in and at 50,000, we would likely make a $20,000 to $25,000 offer. As you go up in value, the percentage shifts a little bit. I mean, somebody with $1 million property is not going to sell it for $300,000. It's just not likely to happen. But you don't need it, quite honestly, if you're talking a 7-figure deal. But yeah, we would go in, we would make an offer of 20, 25,000. We'd have a few people raise their hand. Our business model is to buy the property outright and then resell it. But just like with homes, there's other ways. You can put it under option. You can find your buyer. You can double close. You can trade the paper. There's other
So why don't you do any of
strategies.
those?
It's just easier and cleaner for us to buy it outright. And I mean, if you start looking at options and trading paper, then you've got to go, identify a buyer. And in some markets, we have this. Like, we have relationships with people that we know buy land. They pay a certain price, and so we can arbitrage the deal and bring them together. But as a general rule, we're kind of just buying it and selling it. Even if we double close on the same day, we'll usually take ownership and transfer it. When we resell a property, let's just say that $50,000 property in your example, we typically will market it in two different ways. We'll market a cash deal at 50K, or we owner finance a lot of what we sell. And so we have stacked up promissory notes, which is a bit like a rental income or a monthly recurring revenue. And so over the last 10 years, we have accumulated, people that pay us 5, 6, 7 years out for their property. And so now we have that cushion, if you will, of passive income or monthly recurring income. There's a trade-off because our capital is allocated out for a bit longer, but it's just a strategy that we've employed since we started, and it helps us ride through any business ups and downs, gives me that sense of security that I know there's a certain amount of money coming in each month, and it opens up my ability to explore other business ideas or markets or things like that. So that's the rough model. Yes, I mean we're finding a property, identifying how much value it is, offering a percentage, and then just reselling it.
Beautiful. No, Mike, I really appreciate it. I liked how you elaborated on the seller financing and the promissory note. Out of curiosity, what type of interest rate are you charging?
Well, it kind of depends on the size of the property. We don't, and so the way we market our properties is owner financing for a certain price, and then we'll cash discount a cash deal. And so it's essentially 0% interest rate is kind of how we phrase it. If
Okay.
you were to do the math, it's typically somewhere between 15 to 20% is kind of our usually about where it hits. If you kind of do the financing off of the cash price, sometimes it's a bit lower. It depends on the size of the property, but most people can get a vacant land loan at the bank for between 10 and 12%. And we're not here to compete with the banks. And so if somebody wants to leverage us for owner financing, we need our capital back. Like I can't allocate it out too long. I try to get capital back in 12 months so that we can redeploy, but every deal's a little bit, it depends on how much we bought a property for, but that's kind of roughly where it falls, is in there somewhere.
Makes sense. Makes sense. When you're finding that buyer in that example for 50K, are they typically finding that land listed at 50K through you or your broker on the MLS or on Zillow? Like, how are you selling this asset?
In that case, we would ideally leverage a realtor. And so it would hit the MLS. It would get on Zillow. We personally do a lot of marketing on Facebook Marketplace. It's a huge land marketplace. And so across these 10 years of our business, we probably do 80% of our deals off the Facebook Marketplace. Craigslist, a lot of people employ sale listings off of Craigslist. It's a little tricky to use. They're really tight on their spam filters. There are paid land sites where people go and search for properties. Land.com has an umbrella of different, and you pay to advertise on those sites. That's another popular avenue. We don't use that one so much. We don't really need to, but those are kind of the common. Zillow for sale by owner, if you're not going through the MLS, is another way to get in front of a lot of eyeballs.
That's beautiful, Mike. And once that buyer buys that land from you, what is he or she doing with it? Are they building a house? Are they flipping it to someone else?
Yeah, it depends on the type of property that you're trading in. Obviously, if you're looking at infill lots or something more in a suburban, then people are ideally looking to build. A lot of this rural residential and rural acreage can depend. A lot of people just want an escape. Some people have a dream of building. It really just is all over the place. Us personally, we deal in a lot of rural, what they call it, rural residential. So it's buildable acreage. And yeah, people either want a mobile home or to build or do something like that.
That's awesome, Mike. And for you, when you were looking at real estate, what was it that attracted you to land investing? Was it the purchase price, maybe the lower cost to enter, lower barrier to enter? Like help me understand, looking back today, let's say 10 years later, what first attracted you to land investing, and is that still what attracts you to land investing?
Yeah, great question. So I was let go from Microsoft in 2016, and a year or two before that, I had revisited Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it awakened a little bit this concept of I should get out of, or at least diversify into cash flowing assets, put my money to work, and those kind of things. I started digesting a lot of podcasts like this that were people talking about side hustles or different investment types. And I heard on two different occasions someone doing land flipping, and it just sounded really almost too good to be true. Like it could be very low cost to enter the business, low risk, and people were doubling, tripling, even 5xing your investment in a short amount of time. And so that sparked me to invest in a toolkit. I bought a, user manual basically, but I was working full time and I did nothing with it. Like it went to my desk and I maybe browsed through it kind of, but really didn't apply it. And so in that moment, it was just something that was at hand and we decided to explore it a little further. And so my wife and I, we went to a boot camp and we saw people that were running this as a business and having success, other people that were interested in it. And it just gave us enough of a proof of concept that we decided to go in, and we just said, let's give ourselves 12 months. We put some seed money into the business to start with, and it took off from there. And so it really came down to all the factors you mentioned, but also a little bit of these proofs, these stories that I had heard of people having success. And so I'm always a person that thinks if somebody else can do it, I for sure can figure out how to reproduce their success, especially in real estate. I mean, it's not,
rocket science.
In land, there's really fewer opportunities to make a mistake. I mean, you're not, we've been in some multifamily deals that just got in big trouble, and interest rates run up or properties don't perform, property managers don't perform. There's just really none of that in land. And so we keep going as much as possible back to land. We do invest in a lot of commercial type assets just as a way to diversify and also enjoy tax benefits as well. But yeah, it was just all of those things clicked in the moment. Life also opened up for us at that time where I felt more comfortable what I saw taking a risk, and we had a cushion of a little safety net to lean back on if things didn't work. I knew we could get jobs again, most likely, if it didn't work. We did some Tim Ferriss fear setting type exercises where we said, okay, worst case, we can put a mobile home on our property and live on it. Things like that.
No, I love that, Mike. Very, very insightful. When you look at it today versus maybe 10 years ago, do you feel like you and your wife make more than you did at Microsoft?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you make more than you thought was possible 30 years ago?
Oh yeah, totally.
Now, part of our episode has been about mindset, and it's kind of been stuff we've talked about in the background. I believe you also run a coaching program as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we had people asking us what we do. Could we help them get started? How do we do what we do? And we took some time to think about if it was something we wanted to do. I'm a coach at heart. I love personal development personally, but I also love coaching and mentoring. It's what I really loved in my corporate career, is giving back to employees and others. And so it fulfills that side in me in terms of teaching and giving back. But yeah, for the last 18 to 24 months or so, we run a small coaching business. I like to do it personally. And so it's a time consuming pursuit to be able to work with people at that level. And so I don't want to be a full-time coach, but I certainly love giving back and helping a few people at a time.
Let's expand on that if you don't mind, Mike. Because I think sometimes when you're younger, you have the mentality, or I had the mentality, that those who can't do, teach. And then as you get later in life, you kind of see the value potentially of a coach, of a mentor, of that network. I want to understand if you ever individually went through that journey, or if you've seen that in the market in general, of a lack of value of or appreciation of coaches, mentors, etc., until you actually have one, until you realize how transformative it can be, especially given your previous roles in leadership and just around high performing individuals.
Yeah, it's definitely, for sure, I came from that mindset. I'm a very much of a do-it-yourself person. I like to figure things out, reverse engineer. There's a satisfaction that comes from doing it. As an entrepreneur, there's more satisfaction in getting to the goal quickly and not making mistakes. And so I've kind of seen both sides of it. Like, as a consumer, if you will, I've had a resistance to coaching. It's not an easy decision. I mean, we've had good coaches and bad coaches. When we started our land journey, our coach wasn't very good. He was like really good technically, but he didn't give us any soft support, no mindset, no check-ins. We felt like we were a transaction. And so, fundamentally, that's the main reason we decided to start a program, was to be able to give both the hard skills and the soft skills. Because when we started our business, the soft skills, the things like pushing through doubts, overcoming objections, helping overcome resistance. Those kind of things were where we struggled. We had peers that started land businesses around the same time, and they had results faster. There's obviously people that it took longer, but when you start comparing yourself, and we would be like, gosh, are we doing something wrong? Why are we not able to sell a property? All the things. And we just didn't really get that support. We thankfully had each other to push through, and we had a big compelling reason that we wanted to push through. But, that's a big part of kind of why I like to help people today. But I mentioned I have a business coach right now that I leverage to help, continue to level up my business. Finding and making that decision to invest in that coach was not an easy process for me, because you don't know if you're going to achieve, are they going to deliver what you need? You can see testimonials, but there's still some uncertainty. On the flip side of that, I deal with people almost daily that are interested in joining our program. And there's a lot of them that are uncertain. They're like, okay, how do I know this is going to work? And you don't, right? It's a partnership. The coach has to deliver, but you, as the student, have to perform. And so it's really a vested type interest, and there's some faith that goes into both sides of the equation. It's respect and can empathize very much with the fact that it can be tricky. One thing I heard a few years back, and this was in terms more of an employee, but it applies to coaching. It's an investment. Like, if you look at it as an expense, you're likely not going to sign up because it's an expense. But if you look at it as an investment and you're going to get a return, even our coaching experience back in the day, 10 years ago, it was expensive. I mean, it was crazy, even relative to coaches today. But we've gotten a return
How
out of it.
expensive, if you don't mind me asking, Mike?
We paid $50,000 when we started to sign up with someone, and it was painful. It's still painful to think about it today. I'm embarrassed to say it sometimes, but we have double-digit X'd that investment over the years.
And it's worth reflecting on, because that coach wasn't everything that you needed him to be, but he was enough for you to make well over the 50,000 that you spent. And if it's an investment in
that
yourself,
first year we made that, it was not a.
So then the question is, if it's an investment in yourself, then aren't you worth it to then grow, build a new skill set, build the capacity to not have to need another boss again, etc. Mike, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate, your candor. I really appreciate how much you've shared with us today. If people are listening to this episode and they want to learn more about you, more about coaching, more about what you do, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of messaging, posting about land. And so I think I'm Michael B. Deaton on LinkedIn as my handle. Other than that, we have a website. It's flippingdirt.us. And on the website, and specifically if people go to flippingdirt.us/freedom, there's some free resources. You can schedule a call if you like to chat or see how land might work in your situation. We give a free strategy call. Our email is up there if people want to reach out async. That's probably the best one-stop shop for people to go. But either of those two places are your best bet.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll include those links in the show notes. Mike, once again, this has been a great conversation. It's been a great reminder that it's not just about a return profile or anything like that. It's about really building something that fits your lifestyle. And I think for anyone listening, the key takeaway is this: there are more paths than just the one most people talk about. Sometimes it could be a path that interests you, like Mike mentioned. It could be that kit that you get in the mail that you signed up for, but maybe don't have the time to actually implement. And I think it's just about keeping your eyes open, looking for your next opportunity to help you on your journey. Like I said, we'll link all the links that Mike mentioned in the show notes. If this episode helped, if it provided genuine value, please do consider subscribing, consider hitting the like button. It helps the channel and it helps people like you reach this type of content to ultimately build the financial freedom that you're looking for. Lastly, I would say share it with a friend, somebody who's also looking to learn and grow, who can also benefit from Mike's wisdom. Thanks again, guys. Until next time. Bye.